Ryan Seacrest here. When you have a busy schedule, it's important to maximize your downtime. One of the best ways to do that is by going to chumbacasino.com. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino games like spin slots, bingo, and solitaire that you can play for free for a chance to redeem some serious prizes. So hop on to chumbacasino.com now and live the Chumba life. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Hello listeners and welcome to this third and final part in the mini-series about the way international. Here is M. Without the moments of friendship and positivity, there's an entire childhood to mourn. And being able to, I know not everybody likes the term deconstruct, but be able to come out of an experience and untangle things that have happened, thoughts, feelings, and personality traits, beliefs, relationships, be able to really pull everything apart and decide what you want to keep with you and what you want to leave behind is some of the most exhaustive and difficult work that people come on this show and talk about. What do I believe in? And what do I like to do with my time? Oh no, actually, that's something that my parents would tell me I should do with my time, or that's something that Martindale would tell me I should do with my time. So being able to listen to you talk retrospectively on doing that work is so important, because there could be any number of people listening to our conversation who are in the midst of this whole jumbled up puzzle that they have to piece together and say, oh, all of those pieces, they belong to a different puzzle and I don't need that anymore. This puzzle here, this is the one I want to keep. It's got all of those parts of my childhood, but it's got all of those other amazing things that I have in my life now. And of course, that's a very simplistic way of looking at things, but it's so important to highlight all of the things you've talked about in terms of positive childhood experiences and piecing together what you keep and what you leave behind. And I also understand that that journey never really ends either. So there are still parts that you will probably recognize that you don't really need anymore and that you're going to kind of leave by the wayside as you go on. By the wayside, I didn't mean to say that. Did your parents come to recognize that you were less enthusiastic as the years went on about certain experiences or certain events that you would be expected to attend? And did your responsibilities within the group, did they, as a woman, was your role heightened at any point? Were people looking to you saying you now have these added responsibilities as you get older, as your father plays this role?
So I think there was a point where my parents started just labeling me as like the bad kid or the problem kid. They look back on it and they're like, we just didn't know what to do with you anymore. I had so much anger, and I had to mask it so heavily in front of other people that when it was just us behind closed doors, like my immediate family, I couldn't mask anymore. There came a point where I couldn't suppress anymore. At that point, they had done things like turn my doorknob inside out so they could lock me in my room for prolonged periods. They, used food as punishment and motivator. They really, I think, took all of the plays out of the way parenting manual and tried them with me. And I know they must have realized that my feelings towards everything had changed. At one point, there was a man who had entered our fellowship who was sexually abusing me, and he stayed. And I never explicitly stated to my parents, like, hey, this is what's happening. But I had a clear aversion to this particular person. I was so angry anytime they were around. I was avoidant of them. And it wasn't until two of the other girls complained to their parents that he made them uncomfortable. And their fathers went to my father that this guy was kicked out. He was kicked out of fellowship because of the complaints of these other girls. And I started to recognize that although there were all these clear signs of abuse in my behavior and like physically, that my parents chose to ignore that. And once all of that started clicking into place, you know, I started doing a lot of like refusing to do things and like being willing to like take the punishment in order to start saying no to things. And so I think they did recognize my discomfort and my overall change in attitude. And at the same time, as I was like becoming a teenager, I was expected to monitor children's fellowship and be responsible for the younger children. I was expected to, I wouldn't call it flirty fishing. I think that's like the wrong name for it. But I was certainly expected to wear pretty dresses and put on makeup and like be out as like a face for recruitment. Um, and I think for whatever reason, my parents never saw that as a problem. Um, and again, it's like the parenting manual, it's the indoctrination, it's whatever. But this is where I often get stuck in these conversations is where does indoctrination end and accountability begin as a parent in these organizations? Because I was obviously born in, right? I didn't have any choices. These were just, hey, these are your beliefs now. But my parents chose to join. They chose to stay in, even when they did see red flags. They chose to raise us this way. And, I was talking about this in a support group the other day. And the person facilitating the group was just like, well, when the parents can see either through the child's behavior or some sort of physical evidence that abuse is occurring, that's where accountability starts.
Right.
So, yes, you're indoctrinated. Yes, you are under coercive control. And that does certainly change the conversation around parenting and around parental decisions. But it doesn't change the fact that accountability does indeed exist. And so I think I just can start talking in circles when we get to this kind of topic.
You mentioned that you were labeled mark and avoid.
Mm-hmm.
Is this a follow-on from your rebellious stage? This is obviously a trauma response in your actions, in your behavior. Well, I say obvious, it's through this conversation. This is a trauma response, and you're exhibiting behaviors of needing support, of needing stability, of needing to feel loved and safe. And your parents seem to be putting this down to you being a typical teenager or going through a rebellious stage or falling out of favor with the beliefs, and less so about you reacting to certain things happening in your life. So when you begin to act this way and your parents run out of things that they can do to make things significantly worse by the sounds of things, do you continue with this behavior, or is there a specific event that happens where you're shunned?
So it was, I think, when we were mark and avoid, we were mark and avoid as a family. And
Right.
There were many factors that went into us being mark and avoid, but several of them have to do with me, whether directly or not. So I had these tomboy tendencies. I had these homosexual tendencies, and no matter what my parents did to try to pair me with boys, I clearly had an aversion to that. And I had a big aversion to, kissing men on the mouth and all of the sort of touching that like skirts the line of appropriate. I also became ill, and as with I think a lot of cultic groups, like illness is also attributed to devil spirits. So I learned to speak in tongues and interpret, which was like this huge thing, which for me was not a true experience. I faked it because I had to, right? So like I I know my parents genuinely believe that they were taught to speak in tongues, and the key here is the word it's interpret. They were also taught to interpret what they were saying and like spit out the true word of God per Victor Werewolf. So I learned to speak in tongues and interpret. I still had these devil spirits. I did not get well. So I was having illness. I was having these homosexual tendencies. And I was also a very competitive athlete. And during this time, Craig Martindale was really asking the leadership to spend more and more time like devoted to fellowship, devoted to branch meetings, devoted to ongoing trainings on site at headquarters. And my parents made these really, for me, great decisions, like to pursue, allow me to pursue sports and to come to my sports games. And, you know, I think at this point, my dad had hit some limits and wasn't willing to give as much as Craig Martindale was asking of him. And all of these things combined led to us being mark and avoid. And I'm sure there are other factors that I'm totally unaware of because at the time I was a teenager. So there's probably things that went on with my parents that I'm unaware of. But yeah, we were all mark and avoid as a family, and it was just done. Like literally, my parents sat us down and were like, we were mark and avoid. And everybody that you know is going to act like you died. There were no goodbyes, there were no letters, there were no phone calls, there were no final conversations. Like all of these people in our fellowship, everybody in the extended organization, we were just dead to them.
Gosh, your parents' involvement over so much of their lives and your father's position was probably used as an example as to why everybody needs to do what Craig Martindale is telling them to do. Because your family were prominent, and if this can happen to this family, it can happen to any family. So everybody better get in line and start doing what I'm telling you to do. The adjustment period for all of you in that time must have just been horrific.
Those are some of the worst years of my life. Like they're worse than being in the cult because my parents had been in for like 30 years. They joined when they were like 19 and we were done when I was like 15. Like they were in for a really, really long time, a big portion of their lives. And they didn't have many friends outside of the organization. You know, we had strained relationships with extended family. And they really, I can't imagine the trauma they were experiencing, honestly, that I was completely oblivious to. My siblings were completely oblivious to because we were so busy dealing with our own fallout.
Of course.
But certainly their parenting changed significantly in some ways. I was left to my own devices a lot. I had no understanding of why I was so angry or like how to appropriately express my anger. I was like picking holes in walls and doors. I was punching things. I was getting into fights. I started self-injuring. I started using substances. I started but I was stuck in this like heteronormative mindset. So I was dating a lot of boys. There was sexual assault happening, and like my parents were just like completely checked out. They later told me, oh yeah, we always knew when you were high. Oh yeah, we recognized that our liquor was going missing. At least you were doing it in the house. I heard things like my dad still to this day is like, I just had no idea that you could possibly be gay because there were so many boys. And I looked, you know, like I was like, well, you put all the boys there.
And also I thought we were past that point of it being a choice. We realize now that's not the case, surely. Like, but there's so many boys. You could have just chose one. That's
Right.
not how it works.
Right. Like there were just so many things and there were so many red flags, and my sisters were exhibiting red flags as well. It's not like they were completely untouched by this. Um, and nobody did anything is the thing. Like there was nobody that came to the rescue. The way didn't show back up. Those people who helped raise me never contacted me again. My parents were like just completely checked out and floundering, and no one. I was like in and out of the hospital with like broken bones for years and stitches and things, and like CPS, to my knowledge, was never contacted. There was just all of these moments that could have been like these pivotal changes that were never seized by anybody. And my relationship with my parents to this day is like very complicated and very strained. And sometimes I go no contact with them. Sometimes I have limited contact with them. I'm still learning to navigate all this stuff. I had to figure out my sexuality all on my own. That was a hot mess, you know, and it really wasn't until my wife basically rescued me. I met her. I was still living with my parents, sort of. I was living in my car. I was couch surfing, but technically my residence was them. And for whatever reason, she was like, all right, well, this person is lovely underneath all this intense internalized homophobia and anger. So I'm just gonna put a hand out. And that was really one of the first hands I took. And I was 19 and we're still together. Like I'm
Wow.
37. I've been with her ever since. Like she basically like rescued me and helped me figure all of this stuff out. And as I'm still untangling it, she's so supportive. I finally found like a really great trauma therapist after years of terrible therapy. I got properly diagnosed with some physical and mental health conditions that are being treated, some of which are directly correlated to my time in the cult. I have a great career. I have a home. I have a found family. Um, my life is actually pretty beautiful. And I think part of the beauty is all of the stuff that I overcame, and I wish I didn't have to. But like, I don't know that I would appreciate what I have, the freedom that I have, the choices I'm now able to make without it. And there were so many things to navigate. Like I said, there was a point where like going out in public and being physically affectionate with my wife was just like a hard no. Like, and she had to respect that boundary, which she did for years. I didn't really understand consent. So like even though like I wanted to be intimate with her, I also just like didn't realize that I could be like, you know what, I'm really actually not in the mood right now. And that was something we had to navigate. And she's done it all with a lot of grace.
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
That's so amazing. That's so wonderful to hear. The patience and perhaps not understanding. I mean, I'm almost 300 interviews in at this point, and I don't, I could never truly understand your experiences because I am not coming from a position of lived experience in a cultic environment. But the want to understand is a huge thing for survivors, and the compassion and patience that comes with that want to understand is a big thing as well. To have an ally so strong to hold their hand out to you and say, come on, let's work some things out, and we'll go from there. to respect your boundaries and help you identify what those boundaries are without being coercive is a key thing, because so many times people have come to speak and say, oh, I left this environment and I ended up in this environment because it felt familiar, and that other environment is another one of abuse and coercion. So when you have this family, your biological family and your religious family, or I don't know, pseudo religion, your religious
Sure.
family come together to give you conditional love and then take that away from you with no closure and no integration into society outside of that group, with no support for any of your family members and nobody to give you a helping hand, to have this one woman come to you and say unconditionally, without coercion, without abuse, let's go together and let's see if we can work some things out. It makes me like teary because it's so beautiful, and it's hope for everybody as well. It's not somebody saying, come on, come with me, let's get into another conditional environment where you do all of these things, otherwise I leave you, like you've already been left, or I will perpetrate these experiences onto you like you've already experienced. To have somebody come to you and say, we can do this together, and be true in that, and be safe, and be wanting to understand, and all of those things that you needed for so many years, it's just so wonderful. Kudos to your wife. Big shout out to your wife. If she listens to this, thank you very much.
I don't know. I'm doing a couple podcasts and I'm certainly giving her the option to listen or not. There's a lot of things that she knows about vaguely, or, she's heard about, but I think listening to it in a condensed format like this for anybody who loves the survivor is probably really hard. Um, I don't have words for how thankful I am for her, because, even when we met, I was dating an abusive man. The 4 years from 15 to 19 where I was just like floundering were full of abuse and coercive relationships and people taking advantage of me, my generosity, my resources, because I was, made to work full time basically from 15 onward. So I did have financial resources, I did have a car. And I had no idea how to set boundaries. And I was just so happy people were paying attention to me that it was really easy to be taken advantage of. And, I was dating a pretty abusive guy when we met. And, I had had dalliances, so to speak, with women in those 4 years where I was kind of figuring out like, oh, maybe I'm bisexual. Like that was like my little safety net was like, I could still find like this magical dick, and this magical dick is going to make me heterosexual finally. And that was sort of like the end goal. And like, there was just, yeah, I'm attracted to women, but I will find this magical dude and that will be it. And then when I met her, there was just this connection and this safety where it was all my choice. Like, do you want to be with this guy? Like, I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm here to give you an option. And like, no one had really done that before. I had never been given like, you can have A or B or even C. Like, you can stay with this guy if that's really what you want. And I don't want to watch it. I'm going to walk away if that's your choice. But like, that can be your choice. You can come and try this relationship with me that I think could be really beautiful. Or I can just help you get away from him and then you can go about your life. Like, she left the ball in my court and gave me those three options. And it was really overwhelming because I had never been presented with something in that way before. And like, that just immediately cemented this trust that somebody was actually going to let me make choices. And I chose her. And I'm really, really thankful that I did.
It's a really wonderful thing when you find an individual in life who shows you a form of treatment that you've never experienced before. My partner is the most open and safest person I've ever met in my life. And I honestly didn't think that people like him existed. And even now, when he goes to make a coffee and he's like, do you want a hot drink? And I'm like, yes, please. Even that to me is like something that I never experienced. And it's you're almost kind of on guard for the first few years because you're like, what's your agenda? And then you realize that, you know, sometimes even though you have bad experiences with bad people, or, you know, you have good experiences with good people who are also sometimes bad, you do come across individuals who protect you and keep you safe, and it is unconditional, and it's the most powerful thing. So I hope everybody listening has that person or those people.
Because the people out there who are listening that are still in it, whether they're actually still in an organization or they're in a coercive relationship of some kind, or they're out of those relationships but are floundering like I was for those years, like, that person does exist, and that person could take many forms. They're not necessarily going to be a romantic partner. They don't have to be a romantic partner, but there's going to be that person who puts their hand out, and it's really hard to recognize that hand sometimes. So it's hard, but like holding on to the hope that it exists, I can tell you that it does. And I could say that till I'm blue in the face, but my hope for everybody is that they do get to experience that hand and they choose that hand. And that really can open the world to so many possibilities. And you also can't just do it for someone else. Like, the healing has to be prompted by a need for it or a desire for it. And I really wanted out. I was so trapped, and I really had hit a point where I needed and wanted out if I was going to survive. And so I hope that everybody out there who's in a similar state that I was in can hear this and say, like, okay, maybe there is something out there, and you might not just get the hand, you might have to seek it. And I think that's really scary because, like, even with my wife's support, like, I had to decide that I was going to go to therapy. I had to decide I was going to allow myself to have relationships with people that weren't going to be sexualized. I could just hug a friend that's a boy, and that's okay. It's not going to lead to anything else. I had to let myself experience that. I had to start sharing parts of myself. Like, I don't have, like, in real life friends where I've like sat down and like laid out my experience in this way, but I have friends who understand that I did grow up in a cult and I do have trauma, and like, that love and accept me unconditionally in spite of or because of that. I have my support group. So for those of you who listen to a bunch of cult podcasts, you probably listen to Indoctrination with Rachel Bernstein, and she has a support group, and that support group has changed my life. Finding other survivors to talk to, even if you're not ready to get out, it just opens a little window or a crack in a window. There are
a few people that have been on the podcast that are a part of that support group, and a few that are part of Yanya Lalich's groups as well, and also of the Family Survival Trust. So if anybody listening doesn't have that person or those people right now, we will be those people. You can contact me. I can put you in touch with Em. You can find me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com. We will have those conversations. We can signpost to some really amazing support groups, but also I just appreciate getting emails from people. Sometimes people just want to talk. Sometimes people want to make comments on episodes they've listened to. Some people want to reach out and tell their story. If you are looking for somebody, there are people, and we can be those people until we find a wider network of people. And then all together, without being culty in any way, we will be a community that helps other people heal.
Absolutely. And people can certainly find me and reach out to me on social media or via email. I'm on Instagram as Mark and Avoid. And I have a Gmail. It's iammarkandavoid@gmail.com. Someone took markandavoid@gmail.com already. So if that person is listening and you're a survivor of the way, please do get in touch. But I am especially interested in connecting with second generation, third generation survivors. I think that our situations are significantly different than people who go in as adults. I'd love to connect with adult survivors. And by adult survivors, I mean folks who entered the way as adults. First generation members of the cult, I'm also very open to connecting with, but second generation, third generation survivors of any cultic organization, if you want to talk, I definitely have an ear to listen, and I'm terrible at checking messages, but I swear I'll get back to you if you reach out.
Ryan Seacrest here. When you have a busy schedule, it's important to maximize your downtime. One of the best ways to do that is by going to chumbacasino.com. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino games like spin slots, bingo, and solitaire that you can play for free for a chance to redeem some serious prizes. So hop on to chumbacasino.com now and live the Chumba life. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Just a couple of comments I wanted to make before we finish today. The kissing on the mouth. I did an interview with somebody from the German Baptist Brethren Church, or the German Brethren. No, it's the German Baptist Brethren Church. And the men greet each other by kissing on the mouth. But the men kissing the women on the mouth, or the men kissing the girls on the mouth, reminds me of Keith Raniere from Nexium. So again, we're just getting people cherry picking parts of other people's things and just saying, this is our thing now. And it's all very strange and it's all very creepy. And we should do less mouth kissing of people that we don't know or want to do mouth kissing with, or any type of kissing. And also a point to make before we finish up today is that these conversations are more prevalent than ever. If there are people now joining the way, it's 2023, so we're 23 years past the big kind of information coming out of abuses and allegations. And if the numbers are going up again, there's a chance that enough rebranding has happened, enough splinter groups have moved away from, well, Martindale's names being taken off of maybe some things that are listed on the website. If there is this effort to bury all of the controversies and abuses and harassment and exploitation that has taken place, not just on a sexual level, but financially, physically, if there is a chance that that information is far enough away in a timeline that people are now coming to the Way International without any knowledge that these things have happened, we have to keep these conversations coming. We have to keep them relevant. It doesn't have to be on a podcast. It can be in support groups, in blog posts, on forums, talking about it with your local representative of government, of political seats, because we can't let the numbers grow if the environments are still as abusive as they have been, or if they're abusive at all. So it's incredible that we've been able to have this conversation today. Thank you so much. I had no idea that this group was on the rise again. I don't know if you think there are any other things that we can be doing to really shine a light on this subject, to make people aware so that there are informed decisions before people join groups like the Way International.
Yeah, I think that that's huge. And that's honestly one of my main motivators in starting to talk, because like I'm really just dipping my toe into all of this. This is my second time being interviewed for a podcast, but there aren't those stories. And if you Google the Way International, like the abusive things all fall to the bottom. You really have to dig. If you go on Instagram and you look at the hashtag the Way International, myself and like 2 other people use that hashtag to talk about the Way being abusive, and everything else is these positive, very well polished and manicured things. And so when you're looking at these organizations, you have to do some due diligence. You have to be responsible for your own decision making. But we as survivors, I think, and supporters of survivors, can make it easier for that information to be acquired by sharing our stories by using those hashtags so that when people are searching for the Way International or the ILBP or the IBLP, sorry, those letters are easily reversible, but we're looking at these organizations that exist, Scientology, whatever it may be, that there are things to combat all of the really well-polished information that the organization is putting out there. Because I think that's a big piece of the problem is like, it's very difficult to find these stories and to have access to the information. So putting it out there, as like scary as it is to do, I think is so important. And if you're listening and you're not involved, but you happen to live in Ohio, please contact your representatives, because they are a tax exempt church. They do have positive press in local papers about things they're doing in the community. And they're also a highly abusive, coercive, controlling organization that is doing damage to people still. And you can find these books on Amazon. You can go on Amazon and you can read The Power for Abundant Living. Like, that should not, and obviously you can get into all kinds of First Amendment things here, but like, that should not be what comes up first when you search for these things. The things that should come up first is, this is a cult. This group has done damage. And the only way we can make that happen is by sharing and is by speaking out. So all the other survivors out there, thank you for sharing your stories. It's powerful and it's so important.
Thank you for sharing your story. You said this is your second podcast, and you've come here today and you've given us an entire encyclopedic history of the Way International, peppered with your own experiences, which allows us to understand just how abusive and coercive this group is and has been, and why it's important that we do what we can to continue to raise awareness around not just the Way International, but other groups that are all still taking all of these parts of various playbooks and adopting them into their own abusive practices. I so appreciate you and your time, Em, and I'm so happy to sit here today and talk to you about your beautiful life that you've carved out for yourself after everything.
Thank you so much. It was just an absolute pleasure. I'm so excited to have been interviewed for your show, and I really appreciate the platform. It means an awful lot to me and to lots of other people too.
Thank you very much, and take care. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, you too. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.
That is the end of this mini-series on the Way International. To find out more from Em, you can follow the links in the episode description, and to get in touch with me, you can find me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com, or follow me on Twitter and Instagram at cultvaultpod. I'm your speaker, Casey, host of the Cult Vault Podcast.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on chumbacasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at chumbacasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's chumbacasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.